So this is an orientation lecture about economics on a semester 5 according to the new education policy. Initially in the few minutes I will be basically explaining the approach on what are the main papers included in semester 5, that is core paper, and what will be the elective choices given to you. Changes in the syllabus format, because some paper has been basically shifted, you can say, from semester 4 to semester 5. So according to the new education policy in semester 5, mainly you have to deal with the 3 core paper, and those 3 core paper you can say is extension of, one is extension of micro, one is extension of macro, and one is basically again we can say extension of the macroeconomics in the form of development economics. So semester 5 3 core paper, you can write 3 core paper as Introductory Development Economics. So one paper will be Introductory Development Economics. The approach of this Introductory Development Economics will be, we can say, extension of the macro part, but it is mainly in the form of developmental approach, developmental economics related to the less developed countries, and some technical issues will be involving here, like how to measure poverty, how to measure inequality. Inequality measure करने के लिए there are different index like range, mean absolute deviation, coefficient of variation, Gini coefficient, Lorentz curve. Similarly poverty calculate करने के लिए different index होंगे, like head count ratio, poverty gap ratio, income gap ratio. So what is the significance of those index? So there some part will be a technical and some involving the numerical calculation also. So for one paper will be Introductory Development Economics. The second will be Economic Growth and the Business Cycle. It is basically extension of macroeconomics again. Economic growth used to be the unit in semester 4. Previous जो old syllabus होते थे उसमें semester 4 के अंदर एक unit होता था. अब उस यूनिट को फुल फ्लेजेड एक पेपर के अंदर कन्वर्ट किया गया, मतलब फुल फ्लेजेड एक चैप्टर है, फुल फ्लेजेड इनफैक्ट एक कंप्लीट सब्जेक्ट है. सो इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ एंड बिजनेस साइकिल, तो इन दैट इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ एंड बिजनेस साइकिल वी विल बी बेसिकली एक्सप्लेनिंग द डिफरेंट ग्रोथ मॉडल्स. मेनली वी हैव टू लिमिट आवर सेल्फ हियर फॉर सोलो मॉडल, रोमर मॉडल, इंडिजिनस ग्रोथ मॉडल. सो कंसेप्ट रिलेटेड टू डिफरेंट growth model we have to cover here. So economic growth and business cycle will be the another paper. This third paper, game theory and strategic interaction, is extension of micro. Game theory again used to be the one unit of microeconomics in semester 4. अब semester 4 के अंदर game theory introduce नहीं किया गया. अब game theory के उस unit को completely एक subject के form में आप पढ़ रहे हैं semester 5 के अंदर. मतलब जो old syllabus होता था उसके अंदर growth model was a unit in macro, game theory was a unit in micro, and now these two are completely a separate subject. So economic growth and business cycle is extension of macro. Economic growth and strategic interaction is extension of the microeconomics. So the approach here will be micro, but since game theory and strategic interaction, so obviously you have to read game theory now in quite detail. Similarly, you have to read economic growth and business cycle in detail. Apart from these core paper, there will be some elective paper also given to you. वहाँ से आपको choice है, it depends upon college to college whether they will offer it or not. But I think you will be getting a choice between advanced econometrics. तो आपने introductory econometrics कर रखा है, advanced econometrics, then public economics, maybe open macroeconomics. So we'll be getting some choices. Out of those different choices you have to elect certain, but these are the core paper. That means every student is basically taking these 3 paper. Now we can start what we'll be doing here. I will be just initially explaining the syllabus part of it, just introducing about all 3 core paper. Economic growth और business cycle का reading finalized है, introductory development economics का भी finalized है. We are still waiting for game theory and strategic interaction. मतलब वो अभी फाइनलाइज नहीं है, मतलब डी स्कूल के साइट के ऊपर अपलोडेड नहीं है, बट जो प्रपोज्ड है वो वी हैव दैट इंफॉर्मेशन. सो आई विल जस्ट इन्फॉर्म यू अबाउट इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ एंड बिजनेस साइकिल, game theory and static interaction, and introductory development economics. So we can have the syllabus part, you can just go through with this. First about introductory development economics. So in that introductory development economics, just see the units. One is introducing economic development, you can write it. For development economics, the first unit will be introducing economic development, global perspective. Introducing economic development, global perspective. And most important part is that all reading or references have been changed now. तो old development economics का जो content होता था वो completely overall हो गया, मतलब completely you can say we are reading basically a new content here for the development economics part. So first part will be introducing about the economic development. So meaning of development, what are the indicators and the features, how to measure it, that in the form of human development index, and there are other index also. Then obviously you can highlight this human development report, although written is 2016 but we have to update it. ये old content हो गया, but आज की date में there are various other development indicators. So those development indicators like modified SDI, so all indicators of development, so the concept of development, the meaning of development, factors affecting development, how to measure development. So there are different index to measure the development. So those indexes will be covered in first unit. Then unit number 2 is theories of economic development. So what are the various theories of economic development? That means development is obviously it's a multi-dimensional concept. So since it's a multi-dimensional concept, there will be various dimensions of it. So each dimension has been highlighted by different growth models. तो जैसे कुछ growth model आप मैक्रो के अंदर भी कर रहे हैं, growth model बिजनेस साइकिल में, सोलो मॉडल, then रोमर मॉडल and so on. Similarly, there are various other growth models also, those which will be explaining the development part. So they will take one dimension of the development and highlight that dimension. Another model will take another dimension of the development and highlight that part. So second will be all about theories of economic development, and the reference will be mainly, you can see Todaro in first as well as in the second. Third unit is the strategy of economic development, institutional pathways, which will include basically the reference of Knox, then Hirschman, that is whether the strategy of economic development actually means here what should be the strategy of the development in the developing economies, like whether we should go for the balanced approach or whether we should go for the unbalanced approach. Balanced approach means simultaneous and harmonious development of various sectors of the economy simultaneously. So various sectors like raw material and finished product, consumer good and the capital good, agriculture and the industry, small scale and the large scale, domestic sector and the external sector. So if we have to develop all sectors simultaneously, then that approach is referred as a balanced growth strategy. But obviously to develop all sectors simultaneously, we must have enough of resource. So in the absence of the resource, the better strategy will be to go for the unbalanced growth strategy, as adopted in the Indian economy also. That initially we emphasize on the heavy industries, and then we move slowly by first we created the infrastructure, setting up the heavy industries, and later on the consumer good articles and other articles. So unbalanced growth strategy is more practical. So we have to basically compare between these two, balanced and the unbalanced part, and obviously the other aspect of the economic development. And fourth and last unit you can see here is poverty and inequality. Poverty and inequality. So in this section basically we have to measure poverty. तो poverty के अलग अलग इंडेक्स हैं, और we have to measure inequality के different index like Lorenz curve, Gini coefficient. So given any income distribution, if you have to calculate the Lorenz curve or plot the Lorenz curve or calculate the Gini coefficient. Like for example, if I say that the income is 100, 200, 300, 400, ये 4 इनकम के ग्रुप हो गए, and 100 income is available with 75%, 200 income is available with 25%, 300 income is available with 50%, 400 income is available with 25%. तो अगर ये इनकम का डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन दिया हुआ है कि 100 इनकम इज अवेलेबल विद 75, 200 is available with 25, 300 is available 50, 400 income is available 25%. So given this income distribution, how much is the inequality? Obviously everyone is not having same income, so there is inequality. How much is that inequality? We have to calculate by different index, and for calculating that different index we are using mean absolute deviation, Gini coefficient, coefficient of variation, Lorenz curve and Gini coefficient. So you have to deal basically with that type of question in this section, poverty and inequality. Apart from that numerical part, there will be some theoretical description as well. So mainly in the development economics there are 4 units: introducing economic development first, theories of economic development second, strategy of economic development third, and poverty and inequality. So you can say mainly the approach here will be largely descriptive and analytical, but there will be some calculation based question also from poverty inequality as well as from the conception or development जहाँ पे SDI calculate करना है. So 4 units are there, and end semester exam pattern ये होगा 90 marks for end semester theory. 8 question shall be asked, out of which 5 of 18 marks will be attempted by the students. 5 out of 8 करना है. तो generally what happens that 4 units हैं, 2 question each, although it is not written, but expect 2 question each from all units, and you have to attempt any 5. There will be no sectional question here, so you have the liberty of, you can say, leaving 1 unit like that, because अगर 3 unit के अंदर भी 6 question, you have to attempt 5 question here. So the open ended question will be there, but question may have sub parts, A part and B part. So this was for introductory development economics. Then गेम थ्योरी एंड स्टैटिक इंटरेक्शन. अब गेम थ्योरी और स्टैटिक इंटरेक्शन ये भी फाइनलाइज नहीं है, तो जब न्यू इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी का जो डॉक्यूमेंट है उसके अकॉर्डिंगली रहना, बट व्हाट विल बी द एग्जैक्ट चैप्टर, वो फॉर दैट पर्पज यू हैव टू वेट, बट द कंटेंट विल बी मोर और लेस सेम. इट मीन्स यूनिट 1 कंप्लीट इंफॉर्मेशन साइमल्टेनियस, मूव गेम, dominance, Nash equilibrium, mixed strategy. So you have to basically, this unit will be introducing you all about the game theory. Just in brief, game theory is a mathematical technique to explain interdependency, and interdependency is an important feature of oligopoly. तो oligopoly market का आप कह सकते हैं extension हो गया, oligopoly market को आप यहाँ पे elaborate कर रहे हैं. So game theory is basically a mathematical tool to explain the interdependency which mainly arises in the oligopoly market. And game has different form. मतलब किसी भी game के अंदर, remember there are obviously in any basic game there will be 3 elements. One will be the player, other will be the strategy, and third will be the payoff. Player, strategy and payoff. Payoff means outcome of the game. Strategy means course of action, that is which course of action is open to the player. तो player के पास course of action हो सकता है to choose good X or to choose good Y. The course of action could be to advertise or not to advertise. It could be like in the prisoner's dilemma game, confess or not to confess. So there can be 2 course of action, there can be more than 2 course of action, but generally the game will consist of 2 by 2 matrix. तो 2 by 2 मैट्रिक्स के फॉर्मेट में गेम को आपको यहाँ पे प्लॉट करना पड़ेगा, और गेम को अगर मैंने प्लॉट कर रखा है लाइक फॉर प्लेयर ए एंड फॉर प्लेयर बी, सो फॉर प्लेयर ए एंड प्लेयर बी यू विल राइट द स्ट्रैटेजी, So strategy will be written basically outside the box. Confess, does not confess. X, Y. Go to movie, go to concert. Advertise, not to advertise. Similarly for second person, or within the box we will write the payoff or the outcome. So outcome could be written in terms of the profit, it could be in terms of the loss, it could be in terms of the utility. So out of these two course of action, which course of action will player will choose? Obviously player will choose that course of action which maximizes the payoff. But the outcome does not depend only upon one player choice. The outcome will be determined by the choice made by the second player also, because there is interdependency here. So those points will be elaborated in the initial unit. And game can be simultaneous, game can be sequential. Simultaneous means one player do not know the strategy of the other player, second player do not know the strategy of the first player, then how they will take a decision. If it is sequential, that is player A know what decision has been taken by B, or B know what decision has been taken by A. So game can be simultaneous. Game can be repeated. Repeated, it could be infinitely repeated or infinitely repeated. So there are various dimensions of the game theory that will be elaborated. So a very interesting we can say unit and the overall chapter also. And obviously a little we can say difficulty as well in this unit. Then it has been further elaborated in unit 2 by complete information extensive form game. Extensive form game will be basically represented in the form of a game tree. So game can be written in the matrix form also, it can be written in the extensive form also. Then third part will be basically from here onwards it will be topics from industrial organization, incomplete information, Bayes Nash equilibrium, auction, moral hazards, and communicating information, perfect Bayesian equilibrium, job market signaling and reputation. तो अभी भी आप इसको टेंटेटिव लेके चलना कि these are the 5 units. अब कंप्लीट 5 यूनिट रखा जाता है या इसमें से कुछ कंटेंट कम करते हैं, और रेफरेंसेस एग्जैक्टली we will follow the same one or there will be some changes, we have to wait, but more or less it will remain same. So I am not beginning with the game theory part because we have to wait for this unit to be finalized, but whatever be the book or content, this initial part is going to remain same. At the meaning of the game, the Nash equilibrium, mixed strategy, those things will remain there. So we can start with that part, no problem with this, but we have to wait for the remaining part of it. Clear? तो यहाँ पे basically the approach in this section will be, you can expect basically more numerical based question. In the development economics more theoretical, but here it will be more numerical. So but it is not completely numerical because there are some descriptive part as well. Clear? So given this, now we can move to the third paper, which is economic growth and business cycle. Economic growth and business cycle. ठीक है, सब रिमेंबर एक करंट अपडेट्स है. Now in this paper, one unit will be introduction to economic growth. That is just the meaning of economic growth term. What does it imply? So as you know, economic growth will basically refers to growth of GDP or growth of GDP per capita. So economic growth term, growth is basically a quantitative measure, development is a qualitative measure. तो डेवलपमेंट का एस्पेक्ट भी आप पढ़ रहे हैं डेवलपमेंट इकोनॉमिक्स के वाले पार्ट में, बट हियर वी विल बी मोर कंसर्न अबाउट द ग्रोथ पार्ट ऑफ इट. बट दैट मीन्स ग्रोथ ऑफ द इकोनॉमी, ग्रोथ ऑफ द जीडीपी. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल इफ यू राइट जीडीपी और प्लॉट जीडीपी वाई वाई, तो जीडीपी इज बेसिकली अ फंक्शन ऑफ, इट इज़ अ फंक्शन ऑफ कैपिटल, it will be a function of labor, it is a function of technology. So we can write production as a function of capital and labor, and then you can write it a specific form of it. Like if I write A capital to the power alpha, labor to the power 1 minus alpha. So Y as a function of capital comma labors, that means GDP of the economy depends upon stock of capital, labor force and A repeat here technology. Although growth may depend upon all various other factors, but we will be basically using this function, Cobb-Douglas production function. So according to it, the GDP will be a function of stock of capital, labor force and technology. So obviously the growth will be determined by the growth of technology, growth of capital stock and growth of the labor force. So we will be using that part to explain the growth process. Then first unit will be just introducing about the growth. So only you have to read chapter number 1 of Jones and this section. Main content will be unit number 2. 50% of syllabus will be your unit number 2. It is dealing with the models of economic growth. So again I repeat, models means जो इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ है उसको एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए डिफरेंट इकोनॉमिस्ट हैज मेड डिफरेंट मॉडल ऑफ ग्रोथ. दैट मीन्स they will highlight different dimension. So one dimension will be highlighted by Solow model. So Solow model simply say that the growth of the economy is determined by interaction between capital stock, labor force and technology, and their interaction will determine output and therefore growth of that output. So that idea has to be elaborated here. Yeah. So you have to find the steady state, then what is the meaning of golden rule steady state, convergence, unconditional convergence, what is growth effect, what is level effect. So there are various subtopics within the Solow model. Like it is mentioned here, steady state, Solow model with technology, growth accounting, economics of ideas and innovation, that will come as a part of the Romer model. So next important model will be basically the Romer model. Romer model is said to be an example of endogenous growth theory, और Solow model is an example of exogenous growth theory. Exogenous और endogenous का मतलब है, if I say that growth of the GDP depend upon capital, labor and technology, and then if I say that the technological growth rate is something given, capital force growth rate or labor force growth rate is something given, that means we are not explaining what determines the technological progress. We simply say that the growth of the economy is determined by technological progress, and suppose technological progress is at a rate of 2%. We are not explaining what determines that 2%. So in that case the model will be said to be exogenous. So Solow model is an example of exogenous growth theory. It will simply assume that there is a given technological progress. But when we explain the Romer model, it will say that the growth of the economy is determined by technological, and technological progress in turn is determined by these factors. Like technological progress is determined by what proportion of labor force goes to create research, at what rate they create ideas, what is the productivity of their research, whether research are duplicated or not. So those dimensions will be taken into account by the Romer model. So a little complicated one, but it is a better model as compared to the Solow. So one you are reading for the exogenous growth theory, other you are reading for the endogenous growth theory. So second part is going to be very important, and in this section you have to read chapter number 2 to chapter number 6, 2 to 6. So 5 chapters are basically there. Chapter number 2 will be basically dealing with the entire Solow model. Then chapter number 4 is mainly economics of ideas, then Romer model and so on. Third unit is business cycle. This unit will explain why output fluctuate. These will determine what determine the output. Output कैसे determine होता है? Output determined by capital, output determined by labor, output determined by technology. But now in macro we are also interested in knowing what causes the business cycle, what causes depression, what causes recession, why output does not always increase, why output fluctuate. So what is the reason for fluctuation of that output? So once we know what determines the output, then only we can know when it will fluctuate and why it will fluctuate. So there are different perspectives which will explain how business cycle arises. So there are different models again here: real business cycle model, productivity shock and business cycle fluctuation, new Keynesian model, Phillips curve, and so on. And for that purpose again we find a reading Carlin chapter number 16. तो अगेन आई रिपीट, जो कंटेंट आप यहाँ सेमेस्टर 5 के अंदर पढ़ने जा रहे हैं ये कंप्लीटली न्यू है, इन द सेंस रेफरेंस बुक आपके लिए नहीं है और कंटेंट भी न्यू है. अर्लियर इट यूज टू बी पार्ट ऑफ वन यूनिट ओनली इन मैक्रो, और यूनिट के अंदर भी जो रेफरेंस बुक होती थी, सोलो मॉडल भी अगर पढ़ते थे तो मैनक्यू से पढ़ते थे. नाउ वी हैव टू रेफर बेसिकली फ्रॉम द जोन्स, तो डिस्क्रिप्शन का जो तरीका है वो डिफरेंट है. सो दीज 3 यूनिट इन economic growth and business cycle, and the format of exam in this growth model will be, there will be question in 3 section, section A, section B, section C. तीनों सेक्शन के अंदर 30 मार्क्स ईच के क्वेश्चन होंगे. फर्स्ट सेक्शन विल बी MCQ, सेक्शन A will have 15 MCQ और one liner question of 2 marks each. There will be no choice in that. So obviously from all the 3 unit. Then section B, students will be required to do any 6 out of 8 and question will be of 5 marks each. 6 into 5, 30 marks will be section B, and section C also 30 marks, required to attempt any 3 out of 4, 10 marks each. So first section के अंदर you are attempting 15 into 2, then 6 into 5, and then 10 into 5. ठीक है, 90 मार्क्स का ये पेपर होगा. And you can write one more thing. The question paper will have roughly 50% weightage from unit number 2, that is growth model, which include basically solo model, Romer model, and so on. So 50% weightage is for unit number 2, and remaining 50% from first unit and third unit together. First or third together the weightage will be of 50, and the second unit itself will be 50. ठीक है. So these 3 paper are basically the core paper. ये आपके 3 पेपर हो गए जो कोर पेपर हो गए. इंट्रोडक्टरी डेवलपमेंट इकोनॉमिक्स, सो आई जस्ट इंट्रोड्यूस यू अबाउट द इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट, व्हाट विल बी द कंटेंट एंड फॉर्मेट, इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ एंड बिजनेस साइकिल. सो फॉर द फर्स्ट एंड द सेकेंड वी हैव अ डिफाइंड रीडिंग लिस्ट नाउ, and we are waiting for game theory and static interaction. Now what will be the approach is that when we explain this, everything will be dictated in the class. That means you are preparing the class notes. Maybe some part may be uploaded, but don't wait for that. Don't think that everything will be uploaded in the writer format also, always. So just follow the lecture. Everything will be dictated in a formal way, so that even if you are not reading this type of bulky references or reading list, आपके नोटबुक के अंदर जो कंटेंट होगा दैट विल बी इनफ. सो फर्स्ट यू हैव टू लर्न अबाउट द कंटेंट पार्ट, फिर चैप्टर के एंड में जो प्रॉब्लम्स होंगे, लाइक पर्टिकुलरली इन द गेम थ्योरी पार्ट, यू हैव टू डील विद अ लॉट ऑफ न्यूमेरिकल क्वेश्चन ऑल्सो. सो विल बी ट्राइंग टू प्रोवाइडिंग डिफरेंट प्रॉब्लम सेट एंड यू हैव टू अटेम्प्ट दोज प्रॉब्लम सेट, और उसका विल ट्राई टू अपलोड द सॉल्यूशन एज वेल. सिमिलरली इन ग्रोथ मॉडल 15 MCQ है, ऑब्जेक्टिव बेस्ड क्वेश्चन है फ्रॉम ऑल द यूनिट्स, तो ऑब्जेक्टिव बेस्ड क्वेश्चन का भी सेट होगा. बट मेनली जो कंटेंट जब आप प्रिपेयर करते हैं तो यू हैव टू बी फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल यू हैव टू अंडरस्टूड द कंसेप्ट पार्ट. सो वी विल एक्सप्लेन दैट कंसेप्ट पार्ट, देन एवरीथिंग विल बी डिक्टेटेड इन अ वेरी फॉर्मल वे सो दैट यू डोंट नीड और रेफर टू द बुक. एंड देन बुक के एंड में जो प्रॉब्लम्स हैं विल ट्राई टू सॉल्व दोज प्रॉब्लम्स. तो गेम थ्योरी, इकोनॉमिक growth and business cycle, again the overall approach of this paper will be similar to the macro. That means you may be getting some numerical based question for calculation of steady state, for golden rule steady state, तो वहाँ से numerical based question बनते हैं, but generally theoretical bent ज़्यादा होगा और numerical bent कम होना है. And that will be the pattern in the first as well as the second growth model के लिए भी और introductory development के लिए भी. बट इट इज़ नॉट कि जैसे 8 क्वेश्चन है वहाँ पे 1 और 2 न्यूमेरिकल यू कैन फेस. इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ के अंदर भी कैलकुलेशन हो सकता है, बट बिजनेस साइकिल वगैरह न्यूमेरिकल के लिए नहीं होगा. इट विल बी बेसिकली फॉर अंडरस्टैंडिंग डिफरेंट अप्रोचेज. सो फार वी आर फेमिलियर विद द क्लासिकल और केनेशियन, बट नाउ दिस यूनिट विल बी फोकसिंग ऑन द न्यू क्लासिकल और न्यू केनेशियन पार्ट. but your main content, I said 50% will be for the growth model related to solo model and the Roman model. In this approach, since it is extension of the micro, so you can expect more and more numerical question from the game theory and the static interaction. तो जो कंटेंट अपलोड किए जाएंगे वो आप ई बुक सेक्शन की कैटेगरी में देख सकते हैं. जो एक्सेस मिलेगा उसके पास आपके पास लेक्चर की एक कैटेगरी होगी. तो डिफरेंट यूनिट्स के लिए डिफरेंट मॉड्यूल होंगे. उस मॉड्यूल में आपके लेक्चर उस यूनिट के अपलोड हो जाएंगे. मतलब फॉर एग्जांपल जैसे इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ एंड बिजनेस साइकिल है, तो यहाँ पे 3 सेपरेट यूनिट हैं. गेम थ्योरी हो गया तो 5 सेपरेट यूनिट हो गए. अब वो 5 सेपरेट यूनिट अगर 5 डिफरेंट मॉड्यूल के फॉर्म है, तो ईच मॉड्यूल के अंदर उस टॉपिक का कंटेंट होगा, मतलब लेक्चर है, प्लस जो ई बुक कैटेगरी में जो राइटअप होगा. ठीक है, राइटअप हो गया या फिर कोई क्वेश्चन का प्रॉब्लम सेट हो गया एंड सो ऑन. एंड अपार्ट फ्रॉम दीज 3, इफ यू आर टेकिंग पब्लिक इकोनॉमिक्स और एडवांस्ड इकोनॉमेट्रिक्स, तो वी विल हैव लेक्चर फॉर दैट पर्पस एज वेल. क्लियर. तो बट ये कोर पेपर के लिए मैंने ओरिएंटेशन दिया है. सो I think I have addressed all the issues related to the content part, change in the content, reference जहाँ तक, और जो books reading जहाँ तक updated है या जहाँ पे we are waiting for it. So we'll after that we'll basically start with the content for 3. So this was just an introduction for entire semester 5, and then for every topic, that is for every chapter, a formal lecture will continue after that. Clear?